My 10-year-old son sat at a banquet table holding a single bread roll while his cousins cut into filet mignon 3 feet away. "We didn't order for your son," my brother said, sliding the bread basket toward Milo like he was feeding a pigeon in a parking lot. I smiled and said one word, "Noted." He thought I was giving up. What he didn't know was that I'd spent 4 months quietly auditing the company he believed was about to become his. He didn't know what was sitting in the red folder under my chair, and he definitely didn't know that in 11 minutes, 3 members of the board would walk through that door because I had asked them to. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, what time is it where you're watching this from? I want to know how far tonight's story travels. My name is Rachel Doyle. I'm 36, and I'm a forensic accountant who spends her career finding the money other people think they're hidden well enough. My family runs Doyle Infrastructure Group, a civil engineering firm my father Walter built from a 2-man surveying crew into a company that repairs bridges and water systems across 3 counties. My older brother Callum had been groomed since childhood to inherit it. He wore that expectation like a title he'd already earned, long before he'd done anything to deserve it. I left the family business 12 years ago after Callum took credit for a drainage assessment method I developed as a junior engineer, presented it to a county panel under his own name, while I sat in the audience watching my work become his legacy. My father called it a misunderstanding. I called it the last straw. I built my own practice instead, one client at a time, until companies started hiring me specifically because I didn't flinch when the numbers didn't add up. My son Milo is why I'm telling you this story. He's quiet, methodical, and endlessly curious. He built a working solar-powered water purifier out of scrap parts after watching our town go 3 days without clean water during a summer drought. He entered it in the Regional Young Innovators competition against 600 other students. He won. Callum's twin sons entered a store-bought volcano kit. They got participation ribbons. Callum smiled for the cameras that afternoon, but I watched his jaw tighten every time Milo's name was called. That evening, the family gathered at the Ashford Room, a restored train depot my father's company had just finished renovating, to celebrate the kids. Callum had arranged the seating himself. He'd arranged the menu too. Every child had a plated dinner reserved, except mine. But I had no idea how bad it was about to get. The waiter reached Milo's seat and paused, scanning his list. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't have an order here." I assumed it was a mix-up and asked him to add a plate. Callum leaned back in his chair, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "We didn't order for your son." Then, with a small flick of his hand, he had an assistant bring out a single bread roll on a bare slate and set it in front of Milo like a consolation prize. My mother, Deborah, didn't look up from her sea bass. "You should have packed him something, Rachel. Kids can be difficult." My father stared at his wine glass and said nothing, which had always been his preferred form of participation in Callum's cruelty. I pulled out my phone and showed Callum the confirmation email. I had reserved and paid for Milo's seat 3 weeks earlier, meal selection included. He glanced at it for half a second. Then the venue lost it. "Not my problem." The young waiter's face flickered. He clearly knew something I didn't yet, but Callum dismissed him with a look before he could speak. That small gesture told me everything. This hadn't been a mistake. Callum had changed the order himself, on purpose, because a bread roll was a message. "You may have won an award, but you don't belong at this table." And underneath that message was the real one, aimed at me. "I still decide who matters in this family." Under my chair sat a red folder I had been planning to hand my father privately, after dinner, as a courtesy. Inside it was the preliminary result of an audit my father had quietly asked me to run 3 months earlier, after an insurance carrier flagged unusual cost overruns on 2 municipal contracts. I had intended to give Callum a private chance to explain himself before anything went further. Then Milo leaned toward me and whispered, "Can I just go eat this in the hallway so nobody stares?" Something in me went very still. "No," I told him. "You're staying right where you are." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I want to be honest about something. This wasn't the first time Callum had tried to make me disappear at a table. It was just the first time he'd tried it on my son. For 12 years, I had absorbed every slight quietly, because fighting back had always cost back more than staying silent. I'd rebuilt an entire career from nothing, after Callum stole credit for my work, and my own father, called it a misunderstanding. I told myself I was over it. I wasn't over it. Sitting there watching Milo push a dry bread roll around an empty plate, I felt every year of that swallowed anger rise back up at once. I thought about the nights I rented apartment I could barely afford after leaving the family firm, wondering if I'd imagined how badly I'd been treated. I thought about how easily my family had let Callum rewrite the story every single time. Then came the second blow. Earlier that week, while finalizing the audit, I discovered something I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even my father. 3 subcontracting firms Callum had approved nearly $900,000 in payments to over 18 months shared the same empty storefront as a registered address. No employees, no equipment, no real work. One of them was supposed to have installed reinforced piping on a public water project my father's company had just completed, the same project Milo's science teacher had used as inspiration for his purifier assignment. I sat at that table, watching my son fold his award certificate carefully so sauce wouldn't touch it, and I understood something with total clarity. Nobody was coming to fix this for me. My parents weren't going to intervene. The board wasn't going to notice on its own. I had spent years hoping someone else would finally hold Callum accountable so I wouldn't do that. So I wouldn't too. I realized then, no one was coming to save me. I had to save myself. I didn't raise my voice that night. I didn't storm out. Instead, I excused myself to the restroom, and from a bathroom stall, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Naomi Reyes, the outside compliance attorney the board had hired 6 months earlier at my father's request. The second was to the board secretary, asking her to reach 3 trustees who happened to already be in town for an unrelated fundraiser. Over the following weeks, I did what I do best, quietly, methodically, without announcing a single move. I cross-referenced invoice numbers against county permitting records. I traced wire transfers through 3 shell accounts until they led to a limited liability company that, 3 months earlier, had purchased a lakefront property. I pulled payroll records showing employees who'd been quietly reassigned or pushed out after questioning Callum's numbers. Week by week, quietly, methodically, I built a case the way I'd build one for any client, except this client was my own family, and the fraud was sitting across the table from me at every holiday dinner, smiling like nothing was wrong. There was one small victory that kept me going. My younger brother Ethan, who'd left field operations under mysterious circumstances 2 years earlier, called me one night out of nowhere. "I think something happened to me that wasn't what Callum told everyone," he said. That phone call gave me the second piece I needed, proof that I wasn't imagining a pattern. Callum hadn't just hurt me. He'd been doing this for years, to anyone who got in his way. By the night of the awards dinner, my report was finished. 211 pages, cross-checked twice. I had planned to deliver it privately. Then Callum handed my son a bread roll and called it dinner. They had no idea what was coming. I stood and tapped my glass once. The sound carried farther than I expected, and conversations at the nearby tables faded into silence. My father frowned. "Rachel, what are you doing?" "Correcting the guest list," I said. That's when the door opened. Naomi walked in first, carrying a locked case, followed by 3 board trustees my father hadn't been told were coming. Callum's easy smile disappeared in an instant. "This is a private family dinner," he snapped. Naomi answered calmly from the doorway. It stopped being private the moment company funds paid for it. I opened the folder. This dinner was billed to Doyle Infrastructure Group at $11,000, including a meal for my son that was never actually served to him. I laid out the invoice discrepancies one by one. Inflated venue costs, a non-existent champagne reception, an executive suite booked under Callum's name for a trip that never happened. Then I moved to the real weight of the report. $900,000 funneled through subcontractors that didn't exist. Safety materials substituted with cheaper alternatives on a public water project, and falsified inspection sign-offs with Callum's signature on every one. "This is ridiculous," Callum said, his voice cracking at the edges. "It was one dinner, a joke. A joke makes people laugh," I said. This created a felony-level paper trail. The room had gone completely silent. My father's face went gray as he asked whether the substituted piping posed any actual danger. I told him the truth. It wasn't an immediate risk, but it would need at least $400,000 in emergency repairs before the next hard freeze. Callum tried to turn it back on me, accusing me of staging a coup because your kid didn't get steak. I looked at Milo's untouched bread plate and answered quietly. The bread roll didn't ruin anything, Callum. It just finally showed everyone what you actually think winning looks like. The board chair stood. Effective immediately. Your executive privileges are suspended pending investigation. Callum looked to our parents for rescue. For the first time in his life, neither of them moved. Callum was formally terminated 8 weeks later after an independent audit confirmed everything in my report. He's since repaid a portion of the diverted funds under a court-ordered restitution plan, and he no longer holds any officer position at a company receiving public contracts. My father stepped down as chairman not long after, and for the first time, his resignation letter didn't try to protect anyone's reputation but the company's. Milo never got an apology that satisfied him, and I didn't push him to accept one anyway. Some things don't need to be forgiven to be finished. What he got instead was something better. A plaque with his name on it in the community center that now uses his purifier design in 3 rural water stations, and a mother who finally stopped translating other people's fawns' cruelty into something more comfortable for the family to swallow. I still think about that bread roll sometimes, not because it hurt, but because it was the moment I stopped mistaking silence for peace. Some tables aren't worth sitting at quietly. Some announcements are worth making even when the room goes still. I didn't get an apology that night. I got something better. I got the truth, finally said out loud.